Thank you for coming. My name is Vishal Goenka. I'm a product manager at Google. I'm responsible for growing our Maps API business in key verticals by enabling our partners and our customers build compelling businesses powered by Google's geo services. Today, it is my privilege to talk to you about some of the key location-related challenges that the on-demand economy is facing. Now, powered by smartphones, a number of industries have been disrupted in this space. And they have generated new user behaviors and expectations in the process. Today, what I will do is I will examine the impact of some of these new user expectations and behaviors created by location-enabled services, on-demand services, and how the impact of that on the economics of these businesses, and what opportunities lies ahead of us as we go forward. I'm going to focus on two specific areas of this economy: the local rides and delivery. Let me start by asking you a very simple question to get a sense of the audience. How many of you here have used a local ride service in the US? A delivery service recently in the US where you've had food delivered or groceries delivered? What about outside the US? What about Europe? Okay. Africa? One. How about Latin America? Southeast Asia? Australia? So very few outside of the United States and possibly Europe. Some of the things I'm going to talk about apply more in certain geographies than others, but there is a common thread. Let me begin first with a personal story. About 3 to 4 years ago, I was at the Google office in New York City for a meeting, and I had to catch a flight back at 7 p.m. to San Francisco. I wrapped up my meetings by 3 o'clock, and I headed down to catch a taxi. It was raining, and after waiting for 30 minutes in the rain, I finally decided to take the train, and I barely made it to the airport on time. I later realized why I could not get a cab that day. Because of the rain, the cabbies had made their money earlier in the day because of a higher demand and called it a day. Now, there was no way back then I could monitor the inventory of drivers on the road in real time, and not being a local could have predicted that this would be an expected pattern. Apparently, the locals could have predicted this because they've faced it a few times. Now, when I traveled to India, which is where I was born and raised, and I still have extended family there, if I needed to move around, I would hire a car for the entire day with a driver, because finding a cab where you need it and when you need it was impossible. Now, today, on the other hand, I sit comfortably in my office, maybe as I'm wrapping up my last meeting for the day, or I'm at the terminal of an airport, getting ready to pick up my bags, and I can see how long it would take for the next ride to arrive. I can schedule it ahead of time, and if it's raining, I can actually show up just moments before my ride actually arrives. I've traveled, in the last few years, I've traveled over half a dozen countries and have had very similar experiences across all of those countries. Let's switch gears to ordering food. We normally eat out, but sometimes when we bring food home, it used to be that I would look in my drawers for printed menus that I received in the mail from various restaurants, or looked up their menu online if they had one. And then I would call them, but then either the menus were out of date, the prices were out of date, or I had to plan a trip to go to the restaurant, which limited my choices to only restaurants that were within the range of my willingness to drive. There simply weren't enough delivery options that would deliver unless you had a really huge order. Today, I browse rich menus on the phone. I can order all sorts of cuisines: Italian, Indian, Chinese, Vietnamese, Japanese, and I can be assured that they will arrive when I need it to. I can be at the soccer game of my kids and order food knowing that by the time the kids have returned and showered, the food will be at our doorstep ready to munch. If my kids want cheese pizza and my wife and I prefer something else, perhaps Thai, we can place 2 separate orders and have them be delivered at the same time. Now, I don't know how many of you were at Gayatri's session yesterday, but if you were, she spoke about location as a force multiplier. And she gave examples of how many businesses, including companies in the local rides and delivery space, have built amazing businesses and created new user experiences by leveraging Google's incredibly rich and complex understanding of the real world. Now, traditional taxi drivers did not need a map to navigate the cities that they served. They had developed a large, they had developed their hippocampus area of their memory, and because of the spatial knowledge that they had to develop in order to navigate the world without maps. Now, once map got digitized, some of them started switching and using maps as a tool when they needed to go somewhere they didn't know. However, today, even though I know the route that I commute every day and I know my way back home, I still check Google Maps every day, because sometimes there is a more efficient route. Maybe there is an accident or an unfortunate incident on the road, or perhaps the 49ers are playing nearby and the roads are jammed. And Google Maps is able to tell me in real time an alternate route that is more effective for my journey. Now, as some of you have tried these ride-sharing services in other countries, not just the US, you would have probably seen the familiar Google-powered maps driving many of these companies today. We have a very rich set of APIs that enable developers and our partners build these applications across multiple platforms, whether it's iOS or Android, a good old website using JavaScript, or web services to enable access to our services through your servers. Today, we have over 3 million developers and over 10,000 paying customers using our APIs to build everything from visualizing a point on a map to routing for deliveries or rides, or even programming television remotes based on the location that the device is at. Yesterday, Vagabond was here, and they gave us an example of how they used Google's APIs to program automatic vending machines and simplified the workflow for their workforce significantly and saved a lot of money in the process. Now, looking forward, we're building on these capabilities, and bringing together all of our real-time and historical knowledge of the world and combining it with our machine learning and cloud computing to bring new predictive powers for our customers, bringing new insights as well as predictive capabilities. But in order to understand where this takes us in the future, let's focus on the user. At Google, we strongly believe that if you focus on the user, all things become clear. So speaking of local rides and deliveries, reflecting back on the habits that have changed for me, and I'm sure for many of you, the ease with which these habits changed did not surprise me until I stopped to think about it. My first experience with these ride-sharing services was a magical one. Even though it took me a little bit of overcoming the inertia to try them, it was such a magical experience that I got hooked. Now, over the last 100+ years since Ford invented the Model T and changed transportation in a fundamental way, we have developed a number of habits around mobility. Let's take a quick walk down the memory lane and examine some of these and how they have changed over time. In many countries, I wouldn't say most, in many countries around the world, car ownership is a very common habit that many of us grew up with. Even though we all understand that owning a car is not the most economical decision you could make for mobility. Most of our cars spend most of their time sitting idle. And that garage that we dedicate a huge fraction of our house to store the car while it is not being productive does cost a lot of money. And if you add the cost of gas, maintenance, the payments for the car, insurance, it's not the most economical decision. And on top of it, we have developed the habit of spending hours behind the steering wheel when we could have done something more useful. When we were called upon to hire a ride for a short drive, we have created a whole institution and a protocol around this notion. So we call it taxis or cabs or taxi cabs. Let's examine some of the protocols we have developed. These cars are painted differently so that we can recognize them from a distance. They have special signs on them that you can read from afar and know whether you can hire them or not. In airports, we have dedicated signs and special queues, sometimes really long ones, and people there to manage the queues. Hotels have a special protocol and a special area for getting people in and out of taxis. In many countries, there are special lanes that taxis can drive on, or they're allowed to drive in bus lanes. There are special designated areas where taxis can park that nobody else can park, or where you would go to find a cab. And last but not the least, there's a familiar hand gesture to hail a cab that we have developed, and it may vary from one culture to the other. Now, contrasting with the ride-sharing experience of today, we schedule our rides from our phone, regardless of where we are. Once we have scheduled the ride, finding how to find the specific car that is assigned to you requires a very new protocol. You expect to call the driver or the driver to call you in many cases. Your car could be a Toyota Corolla or a minivan, indistinguishable from any of the other cars on the road. And you really wish you had eagle eyes to spot that license plate from a distance so that you know it's your ride. Now, once the car arrives, we have told ourselves it's okay if the driver does not get out of the car to handle our bags for us. For all we know, he might be a regular Joe just like you and me, or a student doing this part-time, or a person with a desk job. And then once we arrive at our destination, we have accustomed ourselves to not bother about ensuring that we have enough cash in our pocket, or whether or not the driver is going to accept a credit card. So a number of these habits, small ones, have changed as a result of this transformation. The first time I ordered a ride for somebody else, it was even more magical. So a cousin of mine was visiting us, and she was going to spend the weekend with us. She landed in San Jose, but I could not, I had an unavoidable conflict, and I could not go there to pick her up. So I ordered a ride to show up when as soon as she arrived at the airport. I took a screenshot of my app, and I texted it to her, and she arrived home just as when I did from work. It was, again, another magical experience enabled by the service. And of course, now when I travel, I don't bother with car rentals as much as I used to. How many of you here have shared a ride with a stranger? Now, I'm pretty sure many of you did not do this back in the day when you were riding in taxi cabs. It was not a very common thing to get into a taxi cab with a stranger. And yet, this is not a millennial phenomenon. Millennials are known to, or are expected to, are stereotyped with putting their entire life on social media. And so we expect them to be very comfortable with sharing rides with strangers. But clearly, we have a fairly reasonable sample here. And in talking with drivers as well as our partners across many countries, we have found that it's not a millennial phenomenon. How about commuting to work using a ride-sharing service? Anyone? So this is a relatively less common at the moment. I also know a few of my colleagues at Google who have sold their second cars and are using ride-sharing exclusively to get to work. So our habits dictate the principles by which we assign value to products or services. Now, here's another story that I'm going to tell you that many of you road warriors will probably relate to. When I first got Wi-Fi on a plane, I was like, wow, I don't know what to do with this thing. I mean, my plane rides were read a book, maybe listen to an audiobook, watch a movie, or just relax. And the first time I got Wi-Fi, I was like, wow, I can have a communication, real-time communication with my family, with my colleagues at work, and impress them that I'm still working at 35,000 feet. But now, if I'm on a long-haul flight and I'm going to a place for a meeting, I actually plan to work during that time. I identify the parts of the work that I'm going to finish when I'm on the plane. And I see a few heads nodding. So if I don't get Wi-Fi, or if the Wi-Fi is not fast enough to help me thumb through an image-heavy slide deck, I'm really disappointed. So the value that I have placed on that Wi-Fi is significantly different now that my habits require a Wi-Fi on a plane. Now, while Moore's law has kept up the advances in technology-related products at an accelerating pace, as consumers, our expectations and our habits have not only adapted, but very quickly exceeded the capability of technology very soon. Let me give you a few examples. 20 years ago, our expectation for on-demand digital content was limited to getting access to your short messages, your emails, anytime, anywhere. But today, we expect the latest Hollywood blockbusters in ultra-high definition to be accessible anytime, anywhere we are. What's more, now we expect a real person to show up on our doorstep or wherever we are within minutes of summoning them. If you're hungry for something, we expect freshly prepared food from our favorite restaurant, even if it's a hole in the wall, to show up within an hour of desiring it. On the computational side, it used to be maybe 10, 12 years ago that we expected a supercomputer to be able to crunch through lots of data, petabytes of data, and answer our very structured queries within a fraction of a second. And today, we expect a device that fits in our pockets, costs probably less than $50, to understand us, to be able to predict our needs even before we fully express them. And we expect to have a conversation with these devices. Yesterday, you saw during the keynote an example of that. We expect them to personalize their responses based on understanding us. And how much are we willing to pay for all this? Not a lot. Now, it started with digital content. We first got used to getting unlimited digital content, whether it was unlimited voice, unlimited data, unlimited music, unlimited videos at a fixed price. And now we expect physical services in unlimited quantities at a fixed price. Unlimited shipping, unlimited taxi rides. It's been being tried out in a few countries, the idea of unlimited taxi rides for a fixed price. We used to put a huge premium on personalization, on a personalized service. Today, your cab driver addresses you by first name when you meet him or her, or can personalize the music to your liking as soon as you get in the car. And we just expect it. So my second point is that the consumer principles dictate the economics of these businesses. Price has always been a very important driver of consumer adoption. In the ride-sharing space, we have seen that a number of companies have innovated on low-cost product categories in order to drive adoption. And they have actually seen very good results with lower cost categories. Delivery providers also have seen higher adoption with lower cost deliveries. So it should come as no surprise to you that user expectation from these services and their willingness to pay are headed in opposite directions. Now, even as consumers' willingness to pay for these services is reducing, the companies who are enabling these experiences have to make enough money so that when the venture capital dries out, they can sustain the business. Now, the suppliers of services in this economy, the drivers, the full-time drivers or the part-time drivers, they will make less as a result on a per ride basis, on a per mile basis. But overall, they will make more because of higher utilization, enabled by efficiencies that the system brings. But I digressed. Let me come back to user experience for a moment. A few months ago, my family and I were returning from a vacation. We landed in San Francisco airport around midnight. It was cold, our kids were with us, and we waited to order our ride until after we had picked our bags, because there was some uncertainty in how long it would take for our bags to arrive. Once we ordered our ride, it took 8 minutes, and we were there in the cold on the curbside waiting for our car to arrive for about 8 minutes. Not a big deal, possibly, but we're not the only ones. We had other co-passengers who were in a similar boat. It was around midnight after all. When we got in the car, I asked the driver, and he said he too was waiting in the parking lot at the airport or in the waiting lot for several minutes before he got a call for the ride. Now, I know we have the ability today to predict traffic in future based on learnings of the patterns through machine learning, big data, cloud computing, et cetera. And I know it is very hard to predict when a given passenger who walks out of the airplane will emerge on the curbside. But I'm sure there are large opportunities here to reduce that wait time, both for the passengers and for the drivers. And it's not only about user experience. It affects the bottom line. Now let's imagine that a driver saves 2 minutes on average on a typical average ride of 20 minutes. In an 8-hour day, he would deliver 2.2 additional rides by shaving off just a couple of minutes per ride on a daily basis. That means a 10% increase in net pay for the driver. And that 10% goes straight to the bottom line of the ride-sharing companies because the marginal cost of that service is very minimal. So this brings us back to the question of economics. As consumers' willingness to pay is going down for these services and their expectations are increasing, what levers do ride-sharing and delivery companies have to increase or to improve their economics? And we think that the answer is efficiency at scale. So efficiency is key to delivering the economics that is needed by ride-sharing and delivery companies in order to satisfy the consumer principles, the expectations, the behaviors that customers expect because of the new habits that they have developed as a result of these location-powered ride-sharing and delivery services. So now, let's examine some of the key drivers of efficiency in this space. We're all familiar with the notion of last mile. Last mile in the delivery space typically refers to taking the goods from warehouse to your home and delivering it. Now, given the prevalence of ride-sharing and delivery companies around the world, over 600 countries around the world, it should be fairly obvious that the efficiency bottleneck is not about the last mile anymore. It has shifted to the last 1/10 of a mile that I would call the last deci-mile. Let me illustrate this with a few examples. When you order your ride, the driver usually has no trouble getting to within 1/10 of a mile from where you are. But typically getting to exactly where you are often requires a phone call or more than one phone call. And if you're in a foreign country, that phone call could be very expensive, both for you and for the driver. Because we haven't quite perfected all the details required to make sure that the driver arrives exactly where you are. If you are here in Moscone Center and you order a ride, Moscone Center has Howard Street, which is a one-way on one end. Oh, by the way, this is Moscone West, so you have to know that this is Moscone West and not Moscone North or Moscone South. But then there are two one-way streets, and it has doors on both sides. It's not sufficient to have your driver come to Moscone Center. They need to know exactly which route to take so they're on the right side of the one-way street in order to arrive at the exit where you are. Now, this can be extremely frustrating if you're in a new place as a rider and you don't know yourself exactly where you are, let alone explain that to a driver. And if you don't speak the driver's language, it's happened to me a couple of times, once in Japan, once in Latin America, that can be even more frustrating. And how exactly does the driver get to you? Has anyone had an experience where you could see the building where you needed to go, but just couldn't find how to get there? And you went in circles trying to figure out the entry point to the building? Recently, a colleague of mine was in the city, and she ordered a ride and happened to be standing at a bus stop. The car pulled over. She got into the car and noticed there was a bus coming right behind her. And the bus had a camera in the front, and she was intrigued. Later, she found out when she had another co-passenger join her for that ride share, she learned that the buses now have cameras so that they can record which cars are parked at bus stops or stopped at bus stops. So the driver would probably be expecting a ticket in the mail. Ouch. Now, of course, if you're a regular taxi driver, you would probably know these rules. But if you're a regular Joe doing this part-time, it's very unlikely that you would know all these rules. How long exactly will it take to get there? Now, when you order your car or you order your food to be delivered, the company has to look at the supply, the suppliers, the drivers who are around you, and find the driver who's closest to you, for whom it is most efficient to get to you as soon as possible, which requires very precise prediction of how long the driver will take to get to you. Because not having that answer correctly could mean longer wait time for you as a passenger, and probably a suboptimal job allocation to a driver. Perhaps another driver could have done that job faster and probably yielded a higher return overall. So knowing exactly how long it takes to get to a pickup point makes a huge impact to the bottom line once you aggregate it over millions and millions of rides every day. Even as a consumer, we don't like to wait. And you're probably all familiar with airlines and hotels who have increased the value of less wait time by giving their premier customers special lanes to get into the airplane fast, even though the airplane is not going to take off any faster, or check in faster at the hotel. Now, riders today expect to be picked up where they are, even if that point is not exactly on the map. If you are in a big shopping mall and you happen to exit out of the gate, a small gate at the back of the mall that is flanked by two large stores, so it's hardly even visible on the map, that's where you expect the driver to arrive. If you're in a large office complex, you want the driver to pick you up right outside as you walk outside your office building. If you want food to be delivered to you, you want it right outside your apartment, even if that means the driver has to figure out where exactly to park and how exactly to walk from there to the place where you expect the food to be delivered. Sure, we can drop a point on a map. We can do that very effectively. Drop a pin on the map and assume it will all just work out. But dropping a pin on a map gives you a latitude and a longitude, which is very hard for us humans to parse. So the example of Moscone Center, just dropping a latitude and longitude is not sufficient for the driver to know that you are on the Howard Street side of the Moscone Center, and you are waiting right outside the middle entrance. So converting that information to something that human beings can understand requires a vast knowledge at a granularity that is finer than what we have developed today. And while it is helpful to know where every place is, even if it is a smaller place, you want to know, is that place, if you're going someplace, say you're going to a bar with your friends, before you go there, you want to make sure that the place still exists. It is still there, that it is open, that it is busy. Nobody wants to go to a bar that is not busy. But it's not too busy that you can't make your way to the bartender for 15 minutes. And of course, is it worth going? Is that place worth going? There's a lot of information about location that is needed at a scale, at a global scale in order to support the economy, this space. Now, the real world isn't static either. It changes from one second to the next. And we have done a phenomenal job in knowing the traffic patterns with real-time traffic. But there's a lot that needs to be done. As the flow of businesses, as new businesses open, flow of people to businesses change, there's a lot of this information that is essential to making the right decisions in an efficient manner. Has anyone ever experienced a situation where they found that a road that was recommended by the map took you through a barricade because the road was barricaded off for some event, and we thought, oh, there's no traffic here, probably the fastest way to get across. Or a road that had been washed away by the storm the previous night. So there's a lot of real-time changes, real-time events that are happening the world over, and knowing them precisely is important for the efficiency that is required for these companies to thrive. So we are really excited by the opportunities, the challenges and the opportunities that are presented in order to make it seamless and delightful, regardless of the circumstances. So there are three key pillars of efficiency that I've discussed. The last, deci-mile efficiency, knowing the places, knowing every place on the planet at a granularity that is much finer than before. And we have done a tremendous job of indexing places the world over. And while what we have is not comprehensive, it is probably the best that exists. And yet, we need to go one level deeper. We not only need to go broader to have more coverage, but we also need to go one level deeper to get to that exactness, to the preciseness that I was talking about, and make sure that all of the real-time information is even more enriched with information that you need, with information about places, about roads, and so forth. So we are really excited by the opportunities that this presents going forward. Let me leave you with a few thoughts about the future. So as we tackle the problems today in order to make the on-demand economy thrive, where do we see this going forward in the future? Imagine if you could predict how many people were going to show up at the Yankees baseball game that is happening in a few hours or maybe in a few days, and how many of them would need a ride-sharing service to get to that place? Or how many of them would need a ride-share back, and from which locations? It is easy, we heard the example of Pokemon Go, where the demand they expected was significantly lower than the actual demand they observed. It was 50x the demand they expected in the best case. And with Google Cloud, we were able to very quickly provision them as we saw that demand. Because provisioning hardware and software is something we have really nailed with cloud. But getting real people in their cars, provisioned to satisfy demand, there's some physics involved there. And that's hard. So the sooner you can predict, the more efficient you will be in order to capture that demand. Imagine after being able to predict, after a Beyoncé concert in Los Angeles, how many people, once they head home after the concert at 9 p.m., are going to request delivery of food. And being able to provision it in such a way that you can deliver the food to them within 30 minutes of them desiring it. and knowing which restaurants and what cuisines they would like, so that the restaurants are also equipped to handle the load. These are some of the questions our partners and our customers are asking us to help with. And we are thrilled at the opportunities and the challenges that it presents. With our knowledge of the real world and behavioral insights into how people behave in the real world, we believe we are very well situated to address some of these challenges. So where does that leave us with another trend that we see in the future? How many of you here would be shocked if self-driving cars were providing ride-sharing services, say by 2020? Okay, a few of you. So maybe not 2020, maybe 3, 4, 5 years. I feel I'm in fairly good company here, that most of you think that you would not be shocked. So the question that I wondered about was the problems, the challenges of economics that I mentioned earlier. Does it still apply in the world where there's no driver, that it's all self-driving cars, maybe self-driving vehicles to deliver food to your place or packages, or drones that can deliver in your backyard, in your driveway, or right in front of your front door? How does some of the challenges that we see today apply in that future, which is not very far away? Now, if with 5 senses and the human intelligence and a smartphone that can harness the power of the cloud and the real-time knowledge of the world, human beings still have problems solving some of these on a daily basis. It would be my guess that for a robot to solve them would require more, not less data, more, not less services, more, not less information. So some of the things that we're doing today, we're building a bridge to the future. If this future were to arrive, where self-driving cars would show up where you want them to show up, when you want them to show up, you would need all the services and the exactness and the precision that I mentioned in order for that to happen. So we're really excited, as we look into the future, we're really excited by those opportunities. Thank you very much.